Hey guys, it's me, Amaterasu, back with another part 2, Naruto, Tenshikage by Sarakiel, aka, what if Naruto created his own village? But anyways, that's all I have to say, so without further ado, roll the intro.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Boys, my wheels got in my bag and I got out my field. I'm getting this paper, I'm stacking a meal. I'm with your hoe in the house on the hills. Yeah. I'ma keep it real, at the sacrifice to try to get my bands up. Shorty wanna fuck with me, she see me on the camera. She said she in love with me, but really I can't stand her. She just want part of this life cause she see me on the ground.
Chapter 14, The Valley of Death. Konoha. A soft breeze blew through the sleepy streets of Konoha. At this hour of the night, hardly anyone was awake save for the standard complement of guards stationed around the city. One such guard, Shinta, stood at his position at the southern entrance to the city and lit his cigarette, careful to cover the light of the flame from view so as not to give away his position. He wasn't a complete moron after all. He pulled his chunin jacket on tighter, hoping to keep the wind from chilling him even further. His eyes did a quick check of his perimeter and found nothing to be alarmed by. Despite the rumblings of a pending war between Iwagakure and Konohagakure, nothing had been declared as yet. Most Konoha nin though found it odd that Danzo had not ordered an increase in patrols or guards. Shinta scoffed. He, like most ninja he knew, didn't trust Danzo for a second. Even in their minds they couldn't refer to him as the Hokage. Somehow that title just didn't seem to belong to him. He sighed and pulled on his cigarette. 2 more hours till sunrise, he thought. I think I'll have. A well-thrown kunai pierced Shinta's head and prevented him from ever finishing that thought. 5 shadows slipped through the gate and into Konoha, leaving Shinta a lifeless lump in the dirt, the slow burn of his unfinished cigarette smoldering next to him. The shadows didn't make the mistake of going to the Konoha rooftops. Such a move would just silhouette them against the night sky. They moved with intense speed through the shadows of alleyways and dimly lit streets. The map they had memorized serving them well as they split off into one-man missions. The names on their lists would die tonight. It was a little-known fact in Konoha that Mito-gai was a very light sleeper. He would say that the fire of youthful flames kept smoldering and would not be contained even in slumber. Whatever the reason, the shadow that approached his apartment expected to find a sleeping jounin who specialized in taijutsu, so he should have been an easy kill for a ninjutsu expert. As he slid open the canvas screen door, however, the fist that crushed his nose was far from the sight of a slumbering martial artist that he had expected. Like a true ninja though, he did not let a little pain slow down his purpose. In one fluid movement, he stepped forward with his right leg and drew the sword from its scabbard on his left hip. With a soft whistle, the blade sliced through the air. He looked around frantically. The man had disappeared. With a guttural laugh, Mito-gai landed feet first on top of the intruder's head, crushing him downwards into a heap on the floor. The intruder spun with the impact and twirled, fingers making quick hand seals. He fully intended to bring a torrent of stones down on Guy. His earth-type jutsu were the best of the Iwa assassination squad. However, Guy moved faster than his fingers could form the seals, and the intruder tasted the sole of Guy's boot. The side kick sent him crashing headfirst through the concrete wall and into oblivion. Asuma and Kurenai were walking back to his apartment after a very nice night out, when the 2 assassins found them. A fist made of stone rose out of the ground and tried to snatch Kurenai. Simultaneously, a brace of shuriken raced their way to Asuma. He dodged the shuriken effortlessly, parrying some with his knives, only to realize that some were also illusions. Shit, he thought to himself. It was infinitely harder in the heat of battle to discern illusions when they were mixed in with real weapons. He squinted his eyes seriously, glancing over to ensure that Kurenai was alright. She had disappeared from the grip of the fist. The rock seemed to be tracking something moving. Asuma assumed it was her under the guise of a genjutsu, trying to find the source of their attack. He trusted in her to handle her opponent, and pumped chakra into his blades. He too needed to find his assailant. Another brace of shuriken flew at him, this time numbering at least 20. He dodged, ducked and blocked, this time one nicking his arm. Another set of the deadly projectiles came, this time as many as 40. Asuma growled and jumped directly into them. He had seen the shadow that was his assailant. Asuma passed through a few illusionary shuriken, and twirled in mid-air, landing with a side swipe at the discernible shadow. He felt his legs connect and knew he had just caught the man off guard, not having expected a counterattack. On instinct Asuma continued his spin and raised higher off the ground, pivoting on his left foot. As he made a full circle, his right foot lashed out at the ninja who was falling in mid-air from the side swipe kick. The effect was brutal as his boot connected with unprotected ribs. Asuma heard them crunch as the man got thrown into the street. He saw him breathe painfully for a few seconds then stop altogether. Apparently he had crushed the man's lungs. Kurenai was having similar success against her assailant. He clearly had planned to kill her with the first blow. His subsequent attacks were clearly weaker. She supposed his chakra capacity could just be low, but that really was none of her concern. She found him in the shadow of the closed and darkly lit noodle stand. The ninja was frantically doing jutsu after jutsu, trying to find her. She managed to get right behind him before he noticed, and by then it was too late. Her dagger slipped quietly between his ribs and he died looking at the ghost who had stabbed him. The fourth intruder found Aviki waiting for him quietly in his room. There were 2 placings for tea and Aviki gestured to the open chair. The ninja was startled and faltered for just a few seconds from his mission, trying to comprehend. He shook it off though and reached for his shuriken. Aviki smiled at the man who prepared to attack him. Instead, he fell to the ground unconscious. Aviki sipped his tea and opened a window, breathing in the fresh air. The odorless poison was strong enough to knock out his would-be assassin for a day, long enough to move him to somewhere secure to be interrogated. Aviki smirked. His sources had told him less than a minute ago of the attack. The informant was awfully knowledgeable about the incursion, including the targets. Aviki hoped that 3 of the targets were okay. The 4th he had no concerns for. The 5th intruder stared at the empty house. It showed no sign of being lived in for at least a couple weeks, enough for a thin layer of dust had settled in. He cursed. Kakashi was clearly not in the village at the moment. His target was not there, so he had to meet back up with the others. Of all the Iwa assassins, Kogoro was the only one to have ever faced his target before in battle. That was many years ago of course, and it had been a stalemate then, although the scar running across Kogoro's chest where Kakashi's Reikiri had narrowly missed was a burning reminder that he had almost lost. He turned to go when the markers on his arm pinched one by one. He glanced at the temporary tattoos assigned on this mission as one by one they were crossed off. That meant the others were either dead or captured. He raced for one of the exits to the village that he had memorized. He knew the consequences of being captured, and that lent speed to his movements. Unfortunately it seemed as if someone had raised the alarm and he could feel 3, no maybe 4, ninja chasing him. He swore violently and made several hand seals. Almost there. 5 seconds later, and he could feel the ninja almost upon him. Just as he finished his jutsu, he puffed into a cloud of dust and raced back into the forest. The Onbu following him saw the small dust cloud go, and even fired off a few kunai and shuriken that passed right through it. Iwagakure 2 nondescript men walked into the village of Iwagakure, dressed as traders and with bags of goods. Absolutely nothing gave away the fact that they were ninja of the leaf, and had an arsenal hidden amongst the bags, and under their clothes. They approached the very center of the busy marketplace of the city. An almost imperceptible signal was exchanged between them, and then the larger of the 2 thrust his hands into his robes and came up clutching handfuls of kunai with explosive tags attached. He threw the kunai in one movement in an arc first to the north, and then in a repeat of his movements, to the south of the market. Several bystanders were hit by the kunai, even though they weren't specifically aimed at people. The screams started almost immediately and the Iwa ninja police raced towards the 2 men. In the blink of an eye, the world changed. The collective force of the simultaneous explosions rocked the city. Dust and debris flung high into the midday sky. Bodies and body parts rained down on the city. The devastation was incredible. The ninja police found the 2 intruders unscathed in the center of the market. The smaller one was making seals and chanting. The police could see a barely discernible dome over the 2 of them. The larger one readied another round of tags inside the dome. The head of the Iwa police force, Tatsuyi, was no fool. This was a coordinated attack and those 2 ninja were clearly a team accustomed to working together. They expected them to try to attack them, kill them. He made some quick hand seals and slammed his fist into the ground. A dome of rock formed out of the ground, moving up and shifting until finally the hole at the top of the dome was filled, sealing the 2 inside. Another ninja police officer ran up and touched the dome of rock. As he did so it hardened even further into near steel. His clan ability being one that can refine the minerals found in dirt. Very useful when your country's jutsu were earth-based. A faint vibration of the dome told the police that the 2 had tried to blast their way out. The head of police shook his head. Inside that dome with no escape, no air, the explosion would have killed them. And if it didn't, the sudden loss of all the oxygen would have. He surveyed the damage in the marketplace. It was disheartening to think that all these innocent people had died so brutally. He couldn't know for sure, but he felt strongly that the 2 were Konoha nin. He saw a trader close to him struggling to get to his feet. He reached over and held out his hand with a concerned look. "Come on, I'll help you to the hospital," he said. As he looked into the man's eyes, he felt warning bells go off in his brain, but it was far too late of course to do anything about it. Tatsuyi became slightly glassy-eyed and then straightened his back and walked away without a word. The man on the ground collapsed back down. The war they'd all heard rumblings about had officially started. Danzo surveyed his gathered jounin and chunin. They lined the southern edge of a large valley with heavy forests, a small lake, and a river running through it. It was the perfect battlefield for ninja, and it was where they stare across the distance at the Iwa army. He could see the banner of the Iwa royal court, there to witness the glory of their army's victory. He smirked and glanced left. The Fire Country royal court was off to the opposing side, perched where they could clearly see the battlefield. The fools thought this would be entertaining. His primary ninja force stood behind him. He knew that many were unwilling participants, but that did not matter. They were still Konoha ninja, and fierce loyalty to Konoha would drive them to fight. He spoke loudly for them to hear. I know many of you hate me, but I care not for such foolishness. Ahead is our enemy, the enemy of Konoha, the enemy of our daimyo. That is all you should care about. Look at them, hate them, kill them. We take no prisoners today. There was a bristling in the gathered ninja and an almost perceptible electric current in the air. Danzo squinted and looked into the valley where the Iwa ninja had begun to enter. Go, he ordered, and his ninja vanished from behind him and headed to the battlefront. Rock Lee, Ten and Neji raced down the hill, Guy leading the way. They would be the second line of attack as close-range fighters. The long-range ninjutsu experts would be firing off salvos about now. As if on cue, fireballs flew the length of the valley towards the Iwa side. However, a whistling sound signaled that the Iwa long-range experts were also engaging. Boulders the size of Kuji in cannonball mode rained down upon them. Lee and his team dodged them effortlessly, racing for the clash up ahead. Guy made several hand signals while running. The team didn't bother to respond as Guy's back was to them. They broke rank and split off into different directions, making a sprinting circle to meet 50 meters ahead where Guy had spotted the enemy racing towards them. A 5-man team of rock ninja emerged from the foliage. The one who was clearly the leader rushed at Guy, the other 4 hanging back slightly, looking for other Konoha nin. They were not disappointed as Lee was a whirlwind of kicks and punches, taking 2 Iwa nin to the ground with broken bones. Ten exploded out of a bush and threw a brace of kunai at her target. He pulled a wall of dirt from the ground to block them and created spikes of rock which erupted and seemed to chase after Ten. She took to the air in a massive jump and unleashed a hailstorm of weapons. The ninja tried to block and dodge, but there were too many. He pulled a Kiwariyama, only to find as he appeared that Ten had faster reflexes than he did and threw a kunai directly into his chest. Neji was a blur of hand thrusts. His enemy was quick, but no match one-on-one for his deadly palm strikes. This was no chunin match, so Neji held no punches. Each strike incapacitated, permanently. The man shrieked in pain as Neji's last strike caused his heart to explode. Guy was a force of nature. There was a reason he was as feared as Kakashi was. His taijutsu was unstoppable. Using his elbows to ward off hand strikes from the rock nin, Guy's fists flew into the man's head, neck and chest. In circular hits, Guy hit the man in his chest 10, 20, 50 times as he fell backwards onto the grassy forest floor. He looked up at his team, glad they were all okay. Hearing a unique whistling noise coming closer, he looked up and saw a huge boulder almost upon them. Move, Guy shouted, and they dove out of the way as the round rock crashed and rolled back towards the Konoha side. Shikamaru hid in the thick leaves of an oak tree. Asuma stood below the tree, pressed against it, knives drawn. Their tactic was going to be an ambush, waiting for Iwa ninja to pass by. Ino was also hidden. Kuji stood ready to support Asuma in any actual attacks. A lone rock nin came crashing through the bushes. He saw Asuma by the tree and made some hand signs. The ground fell away into a sinkhole, causing the tree Shikamaru was in to collapse. He dared not give away his position though, so he held on tight as the tree fell. Ino concentrated and pushed the man's mind to the side as she took over his body. His friends showed up a second later and she turned on them and buried a kunai into one's chest. He gurgled and collapsed, taking her him down with him. Ino left his body just as another rock ninja speared him. Asuma ran in with his knives, battling the spear wielder. Shikamaru had recovered by now and latched his shadow technique onto the man. He froze with his spear extended and Asuma slid in and cut his throat. Ino looked away from the blood. It wasn't a fair fight, but as Asuma told them before they left Konoha, this was war. Shino, Kiba and Hinata stood at the side of the new daimyo and his royal court, which was the entire royal family. It was decided their talents would be better suited for defense. Shino had his bugs around the area, and Kiba and Akamaru were smelling for anything suspicious. They were supported by at least 10 Onbu in their task of protecting the royal court. They could see small pieces of battles through the trees. Hinata clenched her fists every time someone she recognized fought. Kiba was annoyed to be left out of the main battle, but understood that it was likely they'd see action anyway. Scores of ninja poured into the thick forest below. Fireballs and rocks flew the length of the valley, falling into the patches of ninja, both sides trusting that their own comrades could avoid the barrage. They saw a huge hand slam down in the midst of the fighting. Kuji's clan was definitely doing massive damage to the Iwa ranks. A sudden explosion rocked the valley. Hinata stared with her activated Byakugan at the battlefield. One of the rock nin is exploding the boulders that the others threw into the valley. He's converting them into small sharp shrapnel, she said, her voice taut with tension. One of the Anbu cursed. Shino spoke up. That would be Tatsuo. He's in the Konoha bingo book. A coordinated series of blasts with the telltale sound of exploding tags closely followed. Screams echoed up the valley. The smoke was making even the Byakugan almost useless to see the action below. The royal court though seemed to be enjoying the show. They cheered as they heard explosions, and had a storyteller giving them an elaborately embellished rundown of the events as they took place. Hinata was completely disgusted by them. People were dying. Konoha and Iwa alike. The third Tenshikage, Anaki, scowled as he surveyed the battlefield. He was losing many men. This battle was quickly becoming a melee. That was the plan, yes, but he didn't want to sacrifice too many men. He needed them for what came next. He looked left where a small squad of ninja waited. Go, he ordered. They disappeared in an instant. He was proud of his assassination unit. He hoped Danzo would hold up his end of the bargain, but if not, he had a backup plan for that too. One didn't get to beat Tenshikage without thinking ahead. Danzo signaled his own team of root ninja and they too disappeared in a flash. He fixed his steely gaze on the far ridge where he knew the Iwa royal court lay. He fought the urge to glance over at his own royals. The plan had come this far, nothing would stop it now. He knew what was going to happen just as it did. A single scream. An Anbu took an arrow meant for one of the court. A lady of the court shrieking as his blood spurted onto her finery. 5 ninja appeared from nowhere, clubbing the Hyuga heir unconscious. The bug child fought bravely with one, but the ninja he was fighting used an exploding fireball jutsu and sent him flying back down the cliffside. The dog boy did the best, actually killing one of the assassins, tearing out his throat with his bare hands. One of the assassins though quickly put 4 kunai into both Kiba and his dog. They lay in the dirt, barely breathing, while the assassins continued to decimate the Anbu station there in the royal court. Danzo had positioned himself far enough away from them that even his attempt to rescue them may seem genuine, but would be futile. He knew the caliber of assassins Iwa had. Almost as good as Konoha's. The Konoha assassins were as good as Danzo had promised, Anaki noticed. Within seconds they had taken out the guards he had stationed around the court, and subsequently drugged to slow their reflexes. He knew Danzo would have done the same. Old warriors don't take chances. Anaki knew it was coming, of course. As soon as the last royal was killed, the assassins sped towards him and his personal bodyguard across the ridge. He grinned. He had overestimated Danzo if this was the best plan the old fool had come up with. Danzo watched as the Iwa assassins killed the last royal. He and his men were running towards them in an effort to save the royals. He couldn't help his smile as the last one died. Perfect. He stopped his men and made 2 hand signals. A hailstorm of senbon rained down upon the assassins. 2 managed to escape the barrage, disappearing back down the cliff. Out of the bushes came 4 of Danzo's most trusted root ninja. His most powerful. Snake and Scorpion, take the west ridge. Centipede and Gecko, the east. You know what to do. Anaki laughed as the last Konoha assassin was killed. It was time. He fired off a special blue fireball into the sky. There was a thunderous roar and a huge 4-tailed gorilla came into sight. Danzo had actually been expecting this. His spies had told him that Iwagakure had at least one of the tailed beasts. Grimly, Danzo watched as the beast stepped into the valley, wreaking havoc on the Konoha nin. Anaki was being a better puppet than anticipated. He saw a small speck launch itself from the east ridge and land on the gorilla's arm. What followed next was thunderous. The root ninja known as Centipede was a flurry of punches and kicks, each one a thunderclap that echoed in the valley. The fighting warriors below actually stopped and stared as Centipede rapidly destroyed the left arm of the giant gorilla. Each punch seemed to explode, the chakra that made up the monster dissipating and falling away. Anaki stared in disbelief. One lone ninja was destroying his greatest weapon. Danzo smiled. Centipede's chakra poison attack was strong enough and fast enough to disrupt the control of the Jinchuriki. The gorilla swiped at him but he just jumped and landed on his other arm, running up the shoulder to the head. Again, kicks and fists and destruction. Anaki cursed and wished Han was here. That damn Jinchuriki had gone off on a private mission months ago and hadn't been seen since. Anaki had to use Roshi even though his control of the Yanbi was far from perfect. He was still a formidable weapon though, and the ease with which he was being taken down disturbed the Tenshikage. He called his reserve ninja, in hiding for this moment. 50 fresh ninja appeared, ready for battle. It's time. Kill the Hokage. The ninja ran into the valley, racing for the southern side, jumping from treetop to treetop. Danzo of course saw them coming, and just waited. Another hailstorm of senbon rained down, this time into the valley. It was a massive sight, millions of needles falling from the sky. He knew Snake and Scorpion were expert poison senbon users, so he had no doubt that no one struck would survive. Guy saw the needles begin to rain down and shouted to his Jinan team. Underground. Now. Neji and Ten used the ninjutsu hidden earth technique and vanished in an instant. Lee didn't have that option, but he had been taught another by Guy Sensei. He raised his foot directly over his head and brought it down with all his might. An explosion of earth, and he had made a hole big enough for himself to get into. He dove in and punched the side of the hole, caving it in and holding his breath. He hoped he could hold it long enough for the Senbone storm to end. Shikamaru and his team saw the needles coming too. They were exhausted from chakra use though and couldn't do the hidden earth technique. Shikamaru had them do the next best thing. They dove under the bodies of the Iwa ninja they had killed. Just as the first needles began to strike the ground, they could feel the dull impact as the needles struck the lifeless body's flesh. Fuji grunted and muttered under his breath, "I will not die as a shish kebab." And quat. He held onto the two bodies he used as a shield tightly and waited for the Senbone storm to be over. Aniki cursed as he saw his assassins fall victim to the Senbone storm. A few made it past the first wave, and continued to race towards Danzo. A shadow of movement, and one was dead with a finger strike to his throat. Gecko had joined them on the treetops, balancing precariously but effortlessly on the very tip of a fir tree. He made some fast hand movements then launched at them. In a display of taijutsu that might give Guy a run for his money, he killed the remaining assassins in a matter of seconds. Aniki growled and turned to order his men to retreat. This battle was lost. The Jinchuriki was defeated and his army was at best in a battle of attrition at this point. The plan had worked, the two royal courts were killed, but Aniki's own plan to kill Danzo had been overturned. As he turned to tell his general to order the men back, one of his personal guards, a man he knew from a child and had grown up to be head of the Iwagakure police, Tatsuyi, thrust a kunai into his chest. Aniki spurted blood and fell to his knees as the other guards turned on Tatsuyi and killed him. Aniki lay in the dust and saw Tatsuyi's eyes unglaze just before the moment of death. The look of horror on his face as he realized what he'd just done. Aniki died looking at Tatsuyi's face. Danzo smiled grimly. The Tsuchikage and the Earth Country Royal Court were dead. It was time for the final blow. This one was mental though. He did a fast hand sign and touched his throat. This jutsu would ensure that all the warriors could hear him for miles around. Ninja of Konohagakure and Iwagakure, stop fighting. The Tsuchikage and the royal courts of both fire and earth have been wiped out. This battle is over. I, Danzo, Hokage of Konohagakure, do hereby take control of the land of earth and the village of Iwagakure. All rock ninja who will swear allegiance to me will be spared. All others will be killed immediately. I am your conquering lord, the power supreme in our countries. Swear allegiance. Swear it on your honor. On signal, another barrage of poison senbone rained down into the valley. Shouts of pain and anguish rose up from the valley. None will be allowed to leave this valley alive unless you have sworn allegiance. Choose, Danzo shouted with finality. Guy and his team dug their way up from the dirt, Lee exhausted and breathless, the others nearly as bad. They had heard the proclamation of Danzo. They had won the war, but what was he doing trying to take over the Earth Country? Shikamaru, Kuji and Ino stood up and faced the southern ridge where Danzo stood. He's done it, Shikamaru said quietly. I'm afraid so, Asuma agreed. He's molding himself into the feudal warlord of both countries. What does that mean for us? Ino asked. It means we need to keep our secret even better than before, Ino, Shikamaru said gravely, as Rock Ninja surrendered to the will of the new Lord of Fire and Earth. Tengoku Mabry's wagon burst through the clouds, and landed with a bump continuing to roll. It was followed by several other wagons, coming through the clouds one at a time. They all landed roughly but managed to maintain their balance and loads. Naruto sprung out of Mabry's wagon first, excited to be back home. It dawned on him that he actually considered this place his home. He grinned broadly and stared wide-eyed at the progress his village had made. None of his clones had dissipated in a while. This batch was much stronger than any before. The White Tower was finished. Over 12 stories tall, it stood shimmering in the daylight. A giant quartz stone set in the top, shaped to be a ball with many facets set all over it. It reflected light in all directions, including down onto the white stone walls of the tower, making it seem like it was glowing. Naruto felt a warmth run through him. Senji and Nagi fell in behind him and looked up in awe at the tower. It was indeed a spectacle to behold. Sakura, Hiraka and their new friend Calamity also walked over from Mabry's wagon. Calamity was dumbstruck. This place was more than she'd ever imagined it could be. One by one the new villagers came out of the wagons. Naruto turned back to them and said loudly, "Welcome home!" And quat. Chapter 15, The Chambers. Naruto sat perched on a large flat boulder, trying to remain perfectly still. A gentle breeze blew at his hair and slow beads of sweat dripped down his back. The sun beat down on him, not too hot though considering it was noon. Tenchi had explained that it was the time of year, they wouldn't get snow, but it would get cooler. Naruto focused as best he could on nothing like Pa had instructed him. The sage training had begun almost immediately upon his return to Tengoku. Naruto had hardly seen his friends since he came back. Pa and Ma Toad had agreed to train Naruto here in Tengoku, but insisted that he could not have company, or a break from training other than to sleep, until he had achieved a certain level. When he asked what that level would be, Pa had replied very firmly, "I will tell you when you reach it." A brightly colored red macaw landed nearby and let out a screech that he ignored as best as he could, but he flinched anyway. Pa smacked him on the head with his walking stick. Again, he commanded Naruto. Naruto scowled and rubbed his head. "How am I supposed to keep perfectly still with all these distractions?" Pa growled at him. "You must learn to ignore minor distractions, Naruto. Now start over. And quat." Naruto sighed and closed his eyes, letting the wind run over his body for the 100th time today. Senji watched as old man Tora held his first class. The Warrior Academy was still being built by Naruto clones, so for right now they were under a large white tent, learning about the theories of various martial arts as well as other basic schooling. It was unanimously agreed that the school day would be divided into 2 sections, normal schooling including reading and mathematics, and warrior training. Senji was watching Tora instruct the sleepy class in mathematics currently, and he himself felt like he could doze off at any second. He understood the need for it, but it was god awfully boring. He glanced over at the children. There were 3 tents, with a general age grouping under each tent give or take a few years. Tora was teaching the older generation of children, the young teens and older teens. Mabry was talking to the group below that, ages 7 to 10. Of all people, Guerrera was the one who had volunteered for the kindergarten children, ages 4 to 7. Guerrera was splitting his time between teaching in the mornings, and his masonry work after lunch. So far it was working, and everyone could tell he had a real soft spot for his class. They loved him as well. Senji was there because it was coming up on the class switch, and he was told by Tenchi to come assist him with the first class. Tenchi strolled up to Senji and looked over at the class. He smiled warmly. "Feels like a lot of potential, doesn't it?" Senji shrugged but smiled. "We'll see, I guess. You going to do the chambers training my sensei put us through?" Tenchi nodded. "The first few, not all 35. It will give them a strong base without specializing them in one martial art. After that we can do specialist courses for those who want to choose." Senji grinned. These young warriors in training were in for a real treat. Well, they wouldn't think so right now, but maybe when they look back at it, he thought to himself. Senji could just about make out the 3 orphans Naruto had saved from the half-demon Ji-hoon. They were off to the side of the class, Mirin and Genosuke looking very calm in their white training clothes. Sirin seemed fidgety, itching to get out of the oppressively boring classroom. Next to them were the Kazumo twins Junya and Fuki, paying rapt attention to their grandfather. "Okay class, that's it for our lesson today," Tora concluded, to an almost imperceptible sigh of relief from the teenagers. They raced out of the room into the sunlight of the training grounds. Tenchi led them all outside to an area he had clearly set up beforehand, where there was a large ditch filled with water and floating logs not having been there the day before. Various obstacles and areas were set up all over the field. Senji could not suppress his grin. This was going to be fun to watch. The older generation, or the first class, as Naruto referred to them, would be doing the training with Tenchi and Senji. The second class was off doing physical fitness with Shizune and one of the new citizens of Tengoku, an instructor named Yuan. The third class was too young for anything other than nap time or going back home to their parents or the orphanage, so they were welcome to watch the training exercises that they themselves would be doing in a few years. The first class lined up in front the man-made mode and stared across at Tenchi. "Balance. And quat." Tenchi spoke to them in a commanding ringing voice. "The first thing any and all warriors must have. It doesn't matter if you're a ninja, a samurai, a grappler or a kung fu master. All the basic principles are the same. If you look here, the sign says first chamber and apos. There are 7 basic chambers that you will need to complete in order to move on to your fighting style of choice. Some of you may want to continue down the path of the chambers. I will guide those that wish to go down that path. There are currently many different fighting styles that you can choose to learn in Tengoku, and we hope to add even more as the village builds. The art of the ninja, the way of the samurai, the dance of capoeira, the high-flying lucha libre, any of these plus any style you wish to learn, can be taught to you. But first," he pointed forcefully to the water and the logs floating on it. "First you must cross without getting wet. Any students with special abilities are not allowed to use it. That means you Sirin, and you Kristen. And quat." Senji glanced at the 2 children in question. Sirin he knew could turn into water and emerge on the other side perfectly easily. He did not know about the Kristen girl, but he'd ask Tenchi later. "Begin!" Tenchi shouted. In lines of 2 at a time, the students raced into the water, trying to run on the logs. Almost instantly it became a chaotic scene of splashes and drenched young teenagers. As one fell in, he or she was directed to climb out and go to the back of the line to try again. Senji laughed, remembering the time he had spent doing this training himself. It had taken him a week to figure out how to cross. Tenchi came over and shared his mirth. "Oi sensei, what's with the girl Kristen?" Tenshi pointed at one 13-year-old girl, who laughed as she climbed out of the water. She can pass through objects. Rock, sand, earth, water, nothing can stop her. She's one of Mabry's kids. And quat. Tenshi said matter-of-factly. Senji whistled softly. The academy sure had some gifted people. When they were trained up, he'd almost feel sorry for anyone that picked Tengoku as an enemy. Almost. Guerrera strolled over to his shop. He had enjoyed spending the morning with the children. He smiled as he saw Hiraka playing with his daughter Gabriella. The young female warrior had taken a strong liking to her, as did Hiraka's other friends. Not a day had gone by that either Sakura, Hiraka or the wild one that called herself Calamity hadn't been at his shop spending time with his daughter. It did free him up to teach on mornings, and a kind lady from the, now teeming with life, village would be there soon to watch her while he continued his construction projects. He glanced at his shop in Apos. It was finished before he could start on the academy. Naruto and the other founders of the village had insisted he make a decent home for himself and Gabriella before he began any more buildings. He had said he did not mind sleeping in the tower, but he did prefer his own place. No sooner had he said that than Tenshi had mapped out a nice lot close by that gave him a great view and easy access to everything. A few of Naruto's clones had shifted to work on his home and shop. He kept the heavenly theme, white stone walls, arches and pillars. He had to admit it was the most luxurious looking blacksmith and masonry shop he had ever seen. But this sort of thing would be the norm for Tengoku. Hi Guerrera. Hiraka smiled at him. Is it noon already? She glanced at the sky, the sun in the exact middle. The light from the giant quartz stone that was at the top of the white tower reflected rainbows of light down to her. Not for the first time, a question formed in her mind. Guerrera saw the expression on her face and laughed. How many times is it now? He asked her. She smiled and gave a small laugh. I've lost track, she replied. Okay, well tell me your guess today, he said as he picked up his cooing daughter and touched his masked forehead to hers. Hiraka cocked her head to the side. Well, Sakura seems to think it's possible you found the stone while quarrying the fields for white stone for the tower. Guerrera laughed. No, I did not find the stone here on this island. Damn it. Hiraka scowled. That eliminates finding it here, buying it from a lost prince, stealing it from a warlord, a gift from the actual heaven, and it not being really there but just an illusion. That's about right, Guerrera agreed. None of those are the true origin of the beacon light. Hiraka stood up and sighed. I wish you'd just tell us, we're all dying to know. Even Jiraiya refused to tell us. Said it was your secret to tell. Guerrera nodded. Someday I will explain how it came to be in my possession. And quat. He lifted up a giggling Gabriella, playing with her before the babysitter came. But today is not that day. Hiraka spied Sakura and Calamity over by a fountain that a pair of Naruto clones were finishing. She smiled at the sight of her friends. She hadn't expected to make such good friends in Sakura, and now the new girl Calamity. They just clicked. Calamity was a year older than Hiraka at 19, and Sakura was a few years younger, but the three of them had become inseparable. Calamity had so far resisted changing her outfit, and that was the task at hand for the girls this afternoon. Hi Hiraka, how was Gabby today? Sakura asked brightly. Great. Oh, and you were wrong about the quarry, Hiraka replied. They stood there chatting while the Naruto clones happily laid smooth stones down on the lip of the soon-to-be functioning fountain. So girls, what are we doing today? Calamity asked. Her father was still preparing his restaurant for opening day, but he had run her out of the shop to go spend time with her friends. Today, you officially join our squad Kala, Hiraka said flatly. She had taken to shortening her friends' names just to poke at them. Girls, I said I would already, but after my dad's place opens I need to help him run it, Calamity replied. This was the 10th time they were having this discussion. Yes, Sakura interjected. But most ninja in my village had day jobs as well. There isn't always a mission to go on, and you just have to join us. We're a team. Calamity laughed but Hiraka nodded. Yes, have you looked at how Senji's team is constructed? Sakura whispered under her breath, Naruto's team. Hiraka continued uninterrupted. The boys perfectly balance each other out. Nagi is a short-range specialist. He uses his fists and feet in close-range combat. My Senji is a medium-range expert. His swordsmanship covers that. Naruto is an all-around fighter, but can pull off massive long-range attacks from what we've heard. Together their teamwork is perfect. Calamity cocked her head and looked thoughtful. That's all true. They do work well together. It helps that they're all best friends. Sakura nodded. Like us. I'm a close-range fighter. Hiraka's style is mid-range, so your archery skills would balance us perfectly with your long-range attacks. Calamity sighed and they started walking down the street. My dad agrees with you. I was going to tell you. He says he would be proud of me protecting our new home. He thinks Naruto is the greatest person who ever lived to be able to build this place, and to invite us to move here. He says I can help out at the restaurant, but he can manage if I need to leave. Yay, Hirika exclaimed and hugged Calamity. Now, just one last thing. And quat. She looked Calamity up and down. She wore rough working long-legged pants, and a boy's shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a short kerchief tied around her neck. This look will not do for our team, Hirika said scornfully. Sakura nodded in a serious manner. What's wrong with my clothes, damn it? Calamity asked. The villagers may be calling the boys' team Dainshi, but I'd rather we, the first girls' team, were known not only as warrior angels, but as heavenly beauties as well. She smiled with stars in her eyes. You, my friend Kala, need a makeover. With that, Sakura and Hirika each grabbed an arm of the mildly protesting Calamity and continued their walk into the hustle and bustle of the still building village. As they walked through the main street, Sakura noticed that the stores were all taking on similar styles and qualities of Guerrera's house and shop. The Naruto clones that were everywhere in the village were perfecting the masonry work needed to make strong, sturdy structures that matched the heavenly theme. Inari walked by with a few pipes under his arm and smiled at them. Sakura knew he wanted to join the academy, but admired his resolve to finish the job first. She looked up at the sky as they neared the first shop. The hot midday sun was disappearing behind some dark clouds. It looked like it might rain a little bit later. That night, thunderous rain and lightning pelted the village of Tengoku. Lightning struck the white tower repeatedly, but all the bolts seemed to go straight to the beacon light, which just glowed brighter. Some citizens of the village didn't have proper homes built yet, so were going to stay in their wagons, but Naruto had invited them all into the tower for the night. He reasoned there was room for all, and he wanted everyone to think of each other as family. It worked wonders on the people. The first 2 floors were full of families, laughing and talking to each other. Even those who could sleep in their houses chose to stay with everyone else in the tower. Nagi, on a dare from Senji, stood on a barrel and started to sing a song he had picked up in his travels. Several citizens laughed and joined in, the song a fairly well-known one in certain regions. Nagi danced a small jig as he sang. "'Twas down by the glenside, I met an old woman, a plucking young nettles, nor thought I was coming. I listened a while to the song she was humming, glory oh, to the bold Tengoku men." And the crowd roared in approval as Nagi modified the song to refer to their village. He launched into the second verse and many voices rose to accompany him. Naruto cried tears of laughter, clapping along to the song. Outside, the thunder raged and rain pounded against the walls to the oblivion of the citizens. A few guys looked at each other and ran out the doors into the rain, only to return before Nagi could finish the verse with their instruments. They queued up and played alongside him. Sakura, Hirika and a newly dressed Calamity held hands and danced around the barrel that Nagi was on. This was of course a sign for all who wanted to join in and dance as well. The trio of Spirit Wolf clan members who were there were the first to show off their dancing, as well as laughing uproariously and singing along even louder than Nagi was. Tsunade downed another cup of sake. A fine wines establishment was opening and its owner had brought a few bottles to this impromptu get-together. She heard something hit the building then, but ignored it, thinking it was another lightning strike. She laughed seeing Nagi almost topple off the barrel, his dancing getting a little out of hand considering his foothold, the odd sound forgotten for now. When the first rays of morning light hit the tower, the light hit the beacon and filtered down into the building. Carefully placed seals and crystals reflected and enhanced the light, flooding the interior. Naruto stretched and yawned. The party had lasted until early morning, and he had only gone to bed to the insistence of Pa Toad, who said the training today would not be any easier if he didn't sleep. He looked out the window and sighed, went to the bathroom, showered, changed, and leapt out the window onto the street. He landed gracefully and stood up straight, bending backwards to stretch his back, his hands on his hips. Looking up and slightly back, he saw something against the side of the white tower. "What on earth?" he exclaimed and turned around. A huge billowing cloth with a multitude of ropes dangling from it was stuck against the tower. From a few of the ropes hung what Naruto knew was a bicycle, but this one had a giant fin behind it, and an oddly thin man in a dripping wet black suit waving down at him. "I say, hello down there. Sorry to be a bother, but I've been up here a rather long time." The man shouted down at Naruto. Naruto stared up at him incredulously but was in too much shock to move. "Who are you? How did you get up there?" The man smiled weakly. "My name is Yoshiro Nakamatsu, and my dirigible ran into your tower here last night in the storm. Not that I mind, of course. That storm made my life flash before my eyes. Do you know how many inventions I've done in retrospect? Over 500. That's not a bad lifetime achievement." I pondered this as I faced my death in the storm. But then I saw the light in the sky, and I tried my best to steer towards it. What seems like hours later, I ran into your tower here. I tried calling for help, but the storm was rather loud, and I could have sworn I heard singing for a while. Naruto stared at him slack-jawed for a minute, but then shook himself awake and walked up the tower wall, applying chakra to his feet to accomplish the task. "Well, that's simply amazing now, isn't it?" Yoshiro exclaimed at seeing a boy walk up a wall. "Hold on a second, Mr. Nakamatsu, Naruto said as he approached the man. He unlooped some of the rope from around the man's body and then held onto his hand. Naruto smiled at him warmly. You ready? He asked. The man looked relieved to be untied and perplexed at the question. Ready for what? Naruto lifted the man out of the bicycle and held on tight, jumping off the wall. The man held onto Naruto tightly as they plummeted to the ground. Naruto used his one free hand to push some wind chakra to slow their descent a bit, but they still landed fairly unceremoniously. Yoshiro extricated himself from Naruto and brushed off his coat. Naruto noticed he was wearing a black suit with a red bow tie. A tool belt was strapped around his waist with all manner of tiny contraptions that Naruto had never seen before. I really should have brought my descent device, it would have made coming down from there much simpler. But my Kongming cycle didn't have room now, did it? No, Yoshi, it did not. And quad. The man seemed to carry on a conversation with himself. Naruto looked a little taken aback at this. He'd never met someone who seemed as off as this man appeared to be. Oi Naruto. Senji walked out of the tower, stretching as he did so. Who's your friend? Yoshiro stood up straighter and cleared his throat. I am the scientist and inventor Yoshiro Nakamatsu, creator of the parabolic warming umbrella, Pion spring shoes, and the karaoke machine. He flourished a beaker and a pen, the beauty of invention, the thrill of success, the magnitude of helping the world with advancements in technology. No one knows these things more than I do. Senji and Naruto both stared at the man, jaws open. Nagi and the girls' team had also woken up and witnessed Yoshiro's introduction. Welcome to Tengoku, Mr. Nakamatsu, Tenchi said, walking out of the tower. He too had witnessed the introduction. Pardon me, but we're all a bit surprised at your sudden appearance. Well, yes, I can understand that. And quad. Yoshiro said. It was most fortunate for me though, finding this village. Tengoku, you say? Heaven? Perhaps Yoshi did not survive the night? Jiraiya approached. The villagers had begun to leave the tower to head back to their homes and businesses still under construction. They eyed Yoshiro curiously as they passed by. Mabry looked at Yoshiro and grinned. I remember you. You were run out of a village I was passing through because your house kept exploding. They said your experiments were a nuisance to their society. Yoshiro sighed. Sadly, I cannot tell you which village that was. It has been too many times to count. Naruto grinned and slapped Yoshiro on the back. Well, Tenchi had it right. Welcome to Tengoku, Mr. Nakamatsu. We hope you'll like it here. Tsunade groaned and rubbed her head. Too much sake last night, she thought. With a stretch, she was off her bed and looking out the window. The hospital site was the first thing she saw. Some Naruto clones had already begun work on it this morning. She frowned at the sight, not because the building was unsatisfactory, but because she had no one to staff it. True that the village was still fairly small, only a couple hundred people, but it would grow, and they'd need doctors and nurses. Soon, she hoped she could convince some of the new villagers to join her, but for now all the children seemed more interested in emulating Naruto and being a fighter. Tsunade sighed and walked out into the main hall, hoping that today she could scrounge up some new apprentices or nursing students. Ali stared at the building that Naruto had given him for the Spirit Wolf Guild house. It was just that. A house. A 5-story house with space for meetings and a kitchen on the first floor, and 4 floors of bedroom space. He could easily fit his entire clan into this one building. Of course it wasn't finished. The Naruto clones were busy putting up brick walls and slathering concrete on it. But the main structure was there, and the first floor was completed. Ali was astounded. What also astounded him was that the huge man in the mask had carved a stone circular tablet 4 feet in diameter to be placed over the entranceway to their guild. That stone was in the shape of a wolf's head and had the symbols for their clan around it. Boss, it's something else, isn't it? One of his subordinates said in wonderment. They had been in Tengoku less than 3 weeks and the novelty of the place just never seemed to wear off. Yeah, boss, look at that symbol. It will be with much pride that our brotherhood calls this place home. We've never had a home, the other thief said. No, Ali said softly. No, we haven't. Naruto has kept his word and our honor is now bound to this place. However, he said as he peeled off his shirt and flexed his sinewy muscles. I will forever be damned by Kali herself if I let someone else finish my brotherhood's first real home. And quad. Ali walked over and picked up a pallet of bricks and moved to help the Naruto clones finish the wall they were working on. The 2 other men followed their leader into the building happily, ready to work hard. Jiraiya sat down under a large umbrella overlooking the training field where the students were for the 2nd day in a row, trying to cross a log-filled pond. Next to him sat their new guest, Yoshiro, or Yoshi as he referred to himself. They had been talking long about Yoshi's past and what his plans were for the future. He had asked officially to stay in Tengoku as a citizen. It wasn't like he had anywhere else in particular to go back to. Naruto hadn't even stopped on his way to training but shrugged and smiled. He had said, of course. I thought that was understood from the moment I took you down from the bicycle. Yoshi was fascinated by the concept of the island and held a piece of the solid cloud in his grasp. You know, it occurs to me that this place, while impossible to find, once found is impossible to defend. I mean, everything is wide open. How do you get up here? Yoshi asked. There's a wind stream that picks up objects in some mountains far below and shoots us up. We land over there in that solid cloud bank and walk over to the island. Jiraiya responded. Yoshi looked over towards where Jiraiya pointed and shook his head. Now that just won't do. What if someone sends a bomb up the wind stream? Or the army of a warlord? They'd be in your home before you knew what was happening. Jiraiya shrugged. I put in some seals where the wind tunnel can be accessed, but it's not foolproof. Yoshi pulled out a pad and a pen. I need some measurements. Yes, Yoshi, I know. It's fascinating. Now be quiet while Yoshi thinks. Perhaps an obstacle that will allow the wind but not objects. Jiraiya squirmed uncomfortably as the scientist spoke to himself. Guess he must be alone a lot. No one but yourself for company. What are you thinking, Yoshi? Jiraiya asked after seeing Yoshi write down a bunch of incomprehensible numbers. Why, I'm thinking a gate of sorts. A sturdy gate that would only let certain people enter. But I need measurements, cloud samples, data, more, Yoshi said with a mad smile and rushed off to do his research. Jiraiya shook his head. The man was mad as a hatter, but he had to admit, the self-fanning umbrella he was sitting under, another Yoshi invention, may just make the man bearable to be around. He sighed and watched as yet another young student ended up dunked in the pond. Ji-hoon stared at the ground before him. Kyubi had been here. He looked out over the broken port city of Karachi. At the split houses, the cluttered streets, the hundreds of vultures that circled and infiltrated every inch of this city filled with the rotting corpses of the dead pirates who attacked the city. Ji-hoon absolutely loved this place. He cackled madly and drifted lazily through the town. He chanted a spell and threw some black dust into the air. The dust seemed to multiply and spread all over town. One by one the pirate corpses shifted, then rose and walked towards the center of town where Ji-hoon was waiting. The undead were always fun to play with. As hundreds of undead pirates lined up around him, Ji-hoon looked grim. Time for some serious business. I need to know where Kyubi is. He chanted a spell and signaled for one of the ships in the bay that had been sunken by Kyubi's power. The ship rose out of the waters and floated closer towards shore. Feel his energy. The energy that killed you. Find it. Find him, he commanded, and the undead pirates walked towards their ship to set out into the world. Jiraiya called out from the doorsteps of the tower. Sakura, Hiraka, Calamity. His voice ringing like a bell into the village. The three girls in question raced out of their respective places and rushed towards Jiraiya. They stopped right before him and glared. Do you think you can call for us in a nicer tone next time? Hiraka asked. Jiraiya grinned. You mean you don't want to go on your first team assignment? He smirked at the expressions on their faces. Pack your gear. You're protecting a crowned prince and his son of the Crescent Moon Kingdom as he journeys across the unnamed country. Tengoku archangels were specifically asked for. Money is no object. He glared at the girls in a serious manner. You are now representing this village and our reputation is all that we have. We need to build a strong one, so I want you to do well on this mission. Is that understood? The girls nodded in unison. Yes, Uro-sennin. Jiraiya flinched at that, but didn't bother saying anything. After all, more than half the village called him that now, simply because Naruto did. Sakura looked troubled though and had to ask a question. Why us? Jiraiya smiled and replied. You mean why you girls and not Naruto and his squad? Well, several reasons. He raised his hand and started counting off the fingers. 1. You girls need experience too. We can't focus all our strength on 3 warriors. We need everyone to be strong. 2. Your team is newly formed and you need to cement your teamwork and find your groove, so to speak. 3. As you know, Naruto is undergoing sage training. He's in a dangerous place to interrupt that right now, so he has to complete it before he can leave Tengoku again. He should be tied up for a couple months at the very least. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Jiraiya finished with a smile. I also think it would be good for you to have a more experienced sensei with you, so I've asked Kakashi to supervise your team for this mission. Sakura and Calamity both smiled at that, but for different reasons. Hiraka looked incensed. But Senji Eyes and Naruto set out without a team supervisor. Why do we need one? Because we're women? Hiraka erupted. Jiraiya shook his head. This mission could be very dangerous, but Kakashi will let you girls handle it. He's more of a guide and will help you with training you might need or want along the way. That, and he's going a bit stir crazy, always asking me when my next book is coming out and I need him out of here before I kill him. Hiraka nodded then and the 3 girls sped off to pack for their journey. Chapter 16, Prince, Coastal City of Bayshore, Unnamed Country. Sakura looked at the coastal city before them, squinting against the glare of the midday sun. A cool sea breeze whipped at her short pink hair. She looked back at her teammates as they closed the gap behind her. Calamity had her large bow strapped across her back. Hiraka had her scarf billowing out behind her as if it had a life of its own. All three girls wore their white outfits, each with their own color trimmings, Sakura pink, Hiraka red, and Calamity purple. Kakashi though had opted to not change his clothes into the now standard white Tengoku uniform. As far as Kakashi was concerned, he was still a Konoha nin just visiting some friends. They all paused and watched as the biggest ship they'd ever seen docked into the seaport of the idyllic village. It had taken them the better part of a week traveling south from Tengoku to meet the ship. "Okay girls. And quat," Kakashi said, going over the mission details for the 100th time. Preparation was key on all missions, he kept drilling into their heads. The Crown Prince has decided to circle the globe with his caravan. So they have sailed east from Land of the Moon over the vast ocean to this port city. From here they intend to form a caravan that will take them across the entire world. We are only responsible for the first part of their journey. We must get them safely from this port city, to the border with the Wind Country. Their ninja will take over from there. Any questions? Hiraka replied petulantly, "Nothing has changed since the last 45 times you're gone over this. We get it. We babysit the prince. Tien A, Bei Tuo, and Jing E Dian. I hope he's handsome. And quat," Sakura said dreamily, ignoring Hiraka's strange language that she always resorted to when upset. Her fixation on Sasuke notwithstanding, a girl was allowed to fantasize about a prince if she wanted to. Calamity shrugged. "I doubt it. I don't go in for those fairy tale stories about a handsome prince sweeping the girl off her feet. Just doesn't seem realistic when you spend your life in the Badlands." They continued their walk into the city, looking forward to meeting their first assignment, wondering what type of man the prince was. The prince was a fat man. Sakura looked in awe at the girth of the young man before her. He had to be in his 20s still, even if late 20s. He seemed pleasant enough upon seeing the three girls before him. He even tried to kiss Hiraka's hand, to which she attempted to punch him straight to his border destination. Fortunately Kakashi was quicker than her punch and managed to hold her back. The caravans were being loaded from the ship and it was taking some time, so Calamity was standing by the sea's edge a little distance away from her friends. She managed to pick out the slightest whistle in the air behind her, so she sidestepped to the right and snatched the arrow aimed for her head out of the air. She pivoted and notched the arrow she had caught to her own mini crossbow and fired back instinctively. It was only as the arrow had already been fired that she realized it was a toy arrow. The boy who had fired at her got hit smack in the middle of his head, sending him toppling backwards onto the ground with a thud. Calamity rushed over to help the boy. Her mini crossbows were tuned to deliver a massive amount of force behind each arrow, even a toy one. The boy groaned as the suction-cupped artillery stuck to his forehead quivered. Calamity lifted him to his feet and yanked the arrow off his head. He had to be less than 10 years old. His eyes were glazed over, the shock of the impact still had him dazed. "Hey, are you okay, kid?" Calamity asked him. Why, yes," the boy answered. "I'm okay. And quat." He shook his head to clear it. Calamity nodded. "Good." She slapped him behind his head, sending him into the dust again. "What the hell do you think you're doing firing an arrow at me? What if I'd used a real one to defend myself? You'd be dead now, you idiot. What are you doing to my son?" The fat prince ran as fast as he could towards them, with his entourage in tow. Kakashi got there first though and picked the boy up and dusted him off. "He's unharmed. And quat," Kakashi pronounced. "Who do you think you are, attacking my son?" the prince exclaimed. "He shot an arrow at me," Calamity replied. "He's lucky he wasn't seriously hurt." Kakashi nodded. "It is unwise to sneak attack a warrior." The prince scoffed and walked with his son away from them, back to the caravans. The boy looked back in something akin to wonder at Calamity. "Oh, this is going to be a long journey. And quat," Kakashi muttered to himself. Tengoku in the newly dubbed Mad Scientist wing of the White Tower, an explosion rocked the very tower itself. Guerrera frowned at first. "That Yoshi keeps trying to destroy my tower." But then his frown changed to a smug grin. "He's not so much as succeeding in putting a dent in it. That's my baby. Good girl." Billowing green smoke emitted from the window of the lab Yoshi was working out of. The inventor's voice echoed in the morning air. "Eureka!" A clamoring of footsteps, and a few seconds later Yoshi burst through the doors of the White Tower, looking around madly for either Jiraiya or Tsunade. He found Jiraiya on his way back into the tower from checking on Naruto's training with the toads. Yoshi ran up to him, holding an oddly colored short pole in his hands. I've done it, he exclaimed to the Sannin. "What have you done, Yoshi?" Jiraiya asked, watching curiously as green smoke still continued to billow out of the scientist's temporary lab. "Remember the problem we were talking about a few weeks ago?" Yoshi asked excitedly. "You mean the same problem you talked to me, Tsunade, Tenchi, Guerrera, anyone who will listen, and even yourself more often than not, almost 3 times a day about?" Jiraiya replied. Yoshi looked back up from the pole he was holding in his hands, not having listened to Jiraiya's response. Yes, that problem. I've figured it out. The way to keep attackers at bay." There was a moment's silence, a few heartbeats, as Jiraiya waited, and waited. Exasperated, he prodded the scientist. Well, what is it? This. Yoshi responded, holding the pole forward to show Jiraiya, who looked at it with confusion. A rod? Jiraiya responded. Yes. And quat. Yoshi affirmed. What is a rod going to do against our enemies? Jiraiya asked, one of his Yoshi headaches beginning to settle in. Glad you asked, Yoshi said happily. He pulled the rod back to his left, holding it like a bat. Hold still. Before Jiraiya could blink, the scientist swung the rod at the Sannin. Now Jiraiya wasn't world-renowned just for his gift for writing. He was first and foremost a mighty ninja. He could have easily dodged the rod, but he sensed no malice in Yoshi's attack, so he gritted his teeth and waited for the sting of the impact, but none came. The rod passed right through his body, becoming nothing more than some form of gas and hardening back into a solid rod as it left his body. Yoshi stood there smugly and grinned, all his teeth showing. How did you do that? What is that? Jiraiya asked. This, Yoshi explained, holding the rod across both hands. This is Heavenstone. It's made by a special calcification process using the amazing cumulus nimbus that we are perched upon precariously. Tenchi, who had walked over, scratched his chin. So you found a way to harden the special clouds? Well, in layman's terms, I suppose yes, I did. But it's so much more than that. See, I discovered that every second we stay here on this island, tiny particles of the cloud seamlessly integrate into our very being. We are in essence becoming part of this place. And quat. Yoshi said. Fascinating, Tenchi responded. Is it damaging us? Oh no, it seems to have no effect whatsoever on us. It's harmless. But Heavenstone, which is what I, Yoshi, have decided to call my creation, is also made up of the cloud. This substance is unbreakable, unmoldable, unstoppable, except to the cloud. It won't touch anything that's been in contact with the cloud for a sufficient period of time. So ... and quat. Jiraiya said, thinking. You think we can use this Heavenstone to build a barricade in the windstream? Yes. And quat. Yoshi nodded. I theorize that if I can pump enough energy into the rods, an electromagnetic field can be generated between rods of Heavenstone, thus rendering the border impassable to any object not already a resident of Tengoku. And quat. Yoshi beamed at them. But what about supplies, new people? Jiraiya asked. Yoshi looked perplexed. Oh, new people? I suppose they could sit outside the fence for a few days to get enough cloud in their pores? Guerrero walked over. You had suggested a gate before, didn't you, Yoshi? He looked carefully at the rod in Yoshi's gloved hand. It seemed to change color depending on the angle you looked at it. Yes, a gate would work magnificently. But it can't be shaped or cut. We'd need to have a mold for me to create the material in. And ... and quat. Yoshi closed his eyes and began mumbling to himself. And 50 poles can be embedded around this island as the wall, once I figure out the power supply issue. Great job, Yoshi, Tenchi said, slapping the scientist on his back. Will we have to deal with much more of that green smoke though when you're making it? Yoshi looked up at the tower as the billowing green smoke continued to pour out the window. Oh no, that's just my tea. Would anyone like some? They all walked away. Middle of nowhere, Hiraka walked alongside the caravan, watching as the wheels turned around and around. God, I wish we'd see some action, soon, she muttered to herself. Kakashi was 2 steps behind her and replied in a soft tone. We will, you know. Hiraka smiled a little at that. I know, we're in the Badlands. What is this fat prince thinking passing though here with this rich caravan? Kakashi shrugged. The land of the moon is a very wealthy place. There are many cities just on the inside of the Wind Country's borders that are considered luxury shopping centers. By coming this way around the world, he's saved many months of travel. Hiraka sighed. Laziness? He's endangering his son and this entire company of people out of laziness? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows how royalty thinks? All we need to be concerned about are the 2 scouts watching us from the forest edge to our right, and be prepared for when they attack. Hiraka nodded, whistling up ahead at Sakura and Calamity. A harmless enough whistle that neither seemed to react to. But Sakura managed to walk directly to the side of the wagon with the prince and his son, and Calamity climbed on top, seemingly to stretch. You girls know what you're going to do? Kakashi asked. He would normally have formed a plan for them to follow, but the girls had told him they already had some worked out between them. Since he was there just to advise when needed, he let them handle it. He knew he could step in at any time. He lifted his Hittite off his Sharingan eye and slowly looked over the forest to their left and right. 50 or so, he said softly to Hiraka. Can you manage? She scoffed. Manage? I was hoping to get a real workout. This won't even break a sweat. Kakashi smiled, lowering back the headband. It's a long way to Wind Country, so pace yourself. A brace of arrows flew out of the forest and arced up, then down, racing for the caravan. Hiraka! Calamity exclaimed. Hiraka twirled once, unraveling her scarf and pushed her chi and thought into the red material. It billowed out and shot towards the arrows. She flicked her wrists, steadying her legs into the ground in a horse position then leaping into the air. She seemed to fly, the cloth moving this way and that, trapping the arrows in its material. She twisted and turned, her feet moving as though she were running on the air itself, landing on top of a wagon directly behind the one Calamity was on. Kakashi says 50. Calamity grinned at her friend's talent and palmed her big bow. She had already laid down a quiver with arrows and began pulling them out 2 at a time. She worked the bow like a machine. Arrows, string, fire. Arrows, string, fire. Her sharp eyes picking out shadows and movement amongst the trees of the forest. In a matter of seconds she fired 20 arrows into the woods before the first 2 had even hit their target. Screams of pain told them that at least some had hit. How many, Calam? Sakura shouted up at her. 10 at best. Sorry, too many trees. And quad. Calamity replied, lowering her big bow and pulled out her mini crossbows. Sakura stood there, feet apart, waiting for the rush from the attackers. It came seconds later. 3 large hyenas with riders lurched out of the forest. Each hyena was easily 3 times bigger than Sakura, but she stood her ground as the gnashing teeth and claws raced for her. Sakura? Calamity asked without asking. Sakura shook her head. Time to show her friends why she belonged in this team. As the first hyena got close enough to try to bite her, she sidestepped and cocked back her fist. Futi no Kiwami. She let slip out loud. Tsunade had told her not to shout her technique for the world to hear. After all, they were ninja. But these enemies weren't going to live to tell the name of her technique. The hyena whose head she punched exploded into blood spray and bone fragments, collapsing in front of the other 2. Its rider trapped beneath the massive body. Sakura hand sprung over the body and rushed the second hyena. Its jaws snapped at her face. Her momentum as she ducked backwards while running forward kept her sliding under its stomach. She quickly used a kunai to slice its body open from neck to crotch. It shrieked and fell, thrashing madly, breaking the body of the attacker riding on top of it. The third rider swung a sword that Sakura narrowly managed to avoid. Calamity was about to pick him off as he came around to attack Sakura again, but Hirika appeared next to her and stopped her. Don't do it. She's proving a point. And quat. They watched as Sakura spun around and threw her kunai into the chest of the man. The hyena still came at her though. To who? Us? Calamity asked as Sakura jumped up and came down with her fist into the hyena's head. Us and herself, I think. And quat. Hirika replied. Still 17 in the forest. The others ran. And quat. Kakashi said from the ground. Good teamwork, girls. Way to use your strengths. Sakura inhaled and exhaled sharply, trying to catch her breath. Ha! If only Naruto could see her now. Or Sasuke. Can you see me, Sasuke? Can you see that I'm getting strong too? She walked back closer to the still rolling caravan and rejoined her friends. Konoha, your services will be sufficiently compensated, the sleazy obese courtesan said to Danzo. Even for Danzo, this part of the job disgusted him. He didn't mind the task he was being asked to do, he just hated having to deal with people like this. Yes, it will. Tell Shabadaba that the price is 2 million apiece for each head. The prince and his son. And quat. Danzo spat out at the perfumed man before him. King Shada Baba will be most grateful if you are successful. And quat. The man smirked at Danzo. There are some warriors from some new village in the unnamed lands protecting the caravan. The king hired them, so I don't know anything about them. But I'm sure your talented ninjas here can handle a handful of bodyguards. Danzo irritatedly looked at the courtesan's escort. You. And quat. He directly addressed the bodyguard to the courtesan. Can you speak? The guard looked at Danzo confused. Yes, my lord. Good. And quat. Danzo said, throwing a kunai into the throat of the courtesan. He watched as the man fell to the floor, gagging on his own blood a few seconds before dying. Tell Shada Baba my terms, and tell him if he fails to pay, that it will be his blood on my floor. After the guard left, taking the dead body with him, Danzo summoned 2 of his rude advisors. Assassination assignment. But I don't want any route outside of Konoha at this time. We are still rebuilding strength and solidifying my position. Pardon me, sir, then why take the job at all? One asked. Because rebuilding Konoha is going to be expensive, and Shada Baba has access to more than enough money for our needs. Once he's completed his coup d'etat, we will send a small force to claim that island. I want that treasury for my own. But in the meantime, I need an assassin. Suggest someone and send them out to the unnamed country. We have a map that the caravan will be following. Find them before they come under the protection of Wind. Last thing I need is another war. Not yet anyway. Wind country will face us soon enough. The advisors nodded and left the room. Who are you thinking of? One asked the other. If we hadn't thrown the snake's apprentice into a dungeon a few days ago, I'd say her. But we need an uncomplicated success on this. Send out Asuma along with a small squad of Chunin loyal to Danzo. He was once one of the 13 guardians of the Fire Daimyo, so he can't be happy with the events in the Valley of Death. He has yet to make any obvious moves or objections though. I think he will do the mission grudgingly, but efficiently. So be it. Tengoku Ali looked with pride at the guild house. They had completed it side by side with Naruto's clones in an impossibly short space of time. The stone carving that was their clan symbol was firmly in place over the doorway. Red flags also bearing the symbol of the clan stuck out of the walls at a 45-degree upwards angle, making it seem regal. His 2 fellow clan members also stood in awe of their new home. None of them had ever had anything even close to this. Either born into the clan or orphaned and adopted into the clan, their life had always been on the road. Ali turned to his friend on the right. We will have a ceremony. Find our brothers and tell them I want them here within the week. You know where to start looking. Yes, leader. Now where is the boy that caused all this? Ali asked the second man. He was of course referring to the boy who had been orphaned by the clan on their raid of Naruto's caravan. Ali had not seen him for a few days. Asriel is running the chambers with the other students of the academy. Ali nodded, pleased at this. It was stunning to see the training that the children were being put through. It was training he had heard of in a faraway land, but never seen. It would indeed give all the children strong basic martial arts skills, which they could then use to go off in any direction they chose. It would be a perfect base for the Calaripiato that Asriel would be learning. Has he passed the first chamber as yet? Ali asked. Yes, leader. He and a handful of the others in his class have started the second chamber. After passing the first chamber, which was essentially a perfect balance exercise, the successful students had to immediately begin the second chamber, an arm and shoulder strengthening exercise, carrying buckets of water through a short narrow wooden maze. The only way through was twisting left and right, while holding the buckets above the wooden blunt spikes that they have to navigate. It was grueling, but would give them the strength needed for upper body attacks and defenses. Ali was very impressed with the training, and had high hopes for Asriel, the first of his clan to endure it. The boy had taken to the clan grudgingly. In the outer lands the death of your family was the norm, not the exception. The boy understood the difference between the man who killed his mother, Krishna, and the rest of the clan. Ali had already chosen which of his men would stay to teach the boy and run the guild. He looked around at the village around them. The streets were busy with villagers finishing their shops and homes. Naruto had done a miracle and given these people a home. Still the middle of nowhere Calamity whittled away at the sticks she had handpicked, straightening and forming them into arrow shafts. She'd find feathers tomorrow to notch them with. The sun beat down on her atop the wagon train, but this is what she liked. The traveling, the open air. Her father had moved them around a lot, looking for safer places to live. They had had to restrict their travels to the unnamed country, because of the vast desert that was the Wind Country. Not many could afford the cost of a caravan that could cross that desert. They certainly couldn't. She felt the eyes on her again, the third time that day. Glancing to her left, she saw the prince's son peek at her over the edge of the wagon. You know, you may as well come and help me, if you have nothing better to do, she said without looking at him. She heard him gasp, then could practically feel the gears in his head turning as he took a minute to think. He sat down next to her. How are you so good with your arrows? He asked. Calamity laughed. Food. The young heir looked confused, so she elaborated. Where I grew up, a lot of times it was just my dad and I. So I hunted, and if I missed, we didn't eat. Eventually I never missed. There is a part of the Badlands where the vultures will swarm your prey seconds after you kill it. So you need to be able to kill them too. Speed. Accuracy. It's drilled into you by the harsh realities of life. I got good because I needed to. The boy still didn't seem to understand. Grandfather says one day something important will depend on me not missing. Calamity nodded. Your grandfather is a smart man. One day your life or someone else's could hang in the balance, and you cannot miss. The boy stood up straight. I never miss either. Watch. And quad. He notched his toy arrow to the bow and fired at the back of one of his entourage's head. It stuck and the man exclaimed in annoyance until he saw it was the boy. He smiled and nodded. Calamity laughed. Good shot, but you're old enough that I think the toy should be retired. Firing real arrows is different. The weight is different, the amount of pressure in the string, the distance they can travel. You need to practice with the real deal. And quad. She finished carving the arrow she was working on and held it up. A real archer makes her own arrows. That way you can be sure of the quality. And quad. She took out a small knife and handed it to him, then nodded towards the pile of sticks. Grab one and let's begin. I'll show you how to carve today, and then tomorrow we practice shooting, she said smiling, taking a liking to how interested the boy was. What's your name? He asked her. Calamity. What's yours? She replied. Hikaru. Tengoku. It was night time and the field was empty. But that's what Inari wanted. No witnesses. He braced himself then ran full tilt towards the ditch filled with water and logs. He managed to step on the first log and push off again, but then his next footing slipped and he fell back into the water. He spluttered and swam back to the starting side and climbed out, getting ready to try again. He was not officially enrolled in the school. He and his grandfather were still finishing their job. but Inari had every intention of joining the classes when they were done, and he did not want to be left behind. He had been coming out here every night for a week, trying to pass the first chamber. He inhaled and tried again, still not managing to get past the second step. It had taken him a few days to get even the first step, and this one was harder. He knew some of the kids had passed already, but it was just a handful, 4 at most. He could still catch up if he got this. Tenchi watched from a small distance away, unbeknownst to Inari. "How's he doing?" Kazuna asked from behind Tenchi. "Good and quat," Tenchi replied. "He's figuring it out. He's got the tenacity, that's for sure." Kazuna nodded in the darkness. "We're almost done, and I have to be leaving soon. I know Inari wants to stay. He wants to be close to Naruto." Tenchi smiled. "He's not alone in that. I heard about that bridge in your homeland. The Great Naruto Bridge. I guess he's always had an effect on people." Kazuna looked across as his grandson ended up in the water again. "Yes, he has. Inari is still young though, and his mother would miss him. We've already been gone a year." An owl hooted from a tree nearby. Tenchi spoke quietly so that their voice wouldn't carry to Inari. "Why not bring his mother here? Or at least ask her if she'd like to come?" "I've thought of that. I will suggest it. The choice is hers though. I've already spoke to Jiraiya. I will be back in a month. Someone has to maintain the water mains and power lines if there are any problems. If my daughter chooses to stay in Wave Country, then I will need to be back and forth. If she chooses to come here, then I could just stay." "That would make Inari happy." And quat, Tenchi said. He held his breath as he saw Inari make his second step and slip on the third. He was thinking of some way he could help with boy figure it out, but that wouldn't be fair. None of the other students were given clues, and he already considered Inari a pupil. "Good luck on your journey, Tazuna. Inari will be safe with us. You know we have a wind stream that can take you almost to the Great Naruto Bridge itself." Naruto's clones made special note of that one. Tazuna nodded. "Yes, but I'm too old for that form of travel. I'd rather do it the old-fashioned way. Leave the flying to the birds and the young." And quat. He snickered and retreated into the night. Konoha Asuma stopped at the hospital to check on Kurenai. She had been at the bedside of her students for weeks now. Recovery had been slow for Kiba and Shino. The bug user had massive fire burns that it had taken medical teams days to repair. As it was, he was still going to have a large burn scar on his chest. Many in his colony had died too, causing him further distress. His clan had been assisting with taking care of him, tending to his mental distress at such a huge loss. Kiba had lost a lot of blood from the kunai, so had Akamaru. But they would both survive, it just took time. Hinata was unconscious for a few days but had awoken and left with nothing more than a bad headache and the shame of disappointing her father. He had however been so glad she was alive that he dismissed the claim to disgrace and smiled at her. The Hyuga were against Danzo, albeit secretly. It was clear the death of the royals was orchestrated and that his daughter was meant to be killed along with them. Hiyashi Hyuga was furious but reined in his killing intent, biding his time. Asuma spotted Kurenai in a chair, sleeping. She had never left the side of her students since they were admitted. He smiled and kissed her on her forehead without waking her. He left a rose in her lap and exited quietly. He did not relish an assassination mission. But the sooner it was over with, the sooner he would be back to take care of Kurenai and his team. He leapt through the Konoha gates and headed west. It would take him 2 weeks in a straight line to intercept that caravan, and even then he would be barely a mile or two from the Wind Country border. He had to be swift. Well, it seems like you've made it to the end of part 5, 2, Naruto, Tenshikage, aka, what if Naruto created his own village? But anyways, I hope all of you have a wonderful day/night. Bye.